Hey, Lewis, wake up!
What's happening? Oh, you're listening to the Real Anime Podcast with myself, Lewis Knight, who just woke up from a quality, lovely sleep.
Lewis, thank you for waking up.
We're going to be talking about Brad Pitt's latest film. Well, not really latest film, but came out about a year ago, F1, where it managed to get a bunch of awards. Where we're going to be talking a bit about that film today. So, with that being said, whilst I get some good quality sleep ahead of me, why not? Why don't we let Mohnish take over for the podcast for today? Okay, guys. Good night.
So he's awake. For those of you who can't hear, Lewis is doing fine. He's just had a long day, but alas, we are here to now talk about the Brad Pitt movie F1 because it is back in Malaysian cinemas for a limited run only because of the Oscar campaigns and the Best Picture nominations, Best Score nominations, and I do believe it's Best Visual Effects nominations as well. How this film didn't get nominated for Best Cinematography blows my mind. But aside from that, Lewis, how did F1 make you feel? Your initial impressions of F1, what do we think?
Well, the first thing I saw was just Brad Pitt being Brad Pitt. That's all I can say. You know, the moment when you see Brad Pitt in any film, you just already know what you're going to get out of him. No matter what film it is, that's the first thing you see. But nevertheless, enough about him. The first thing which I was really impressed by was by cinematography. Cinematography, right? It blows my mind that it was not selected for the Oscars, right? I don't know how, I don't know why, I don't know what. But the thing is, the cinematography was amazing, especially, the shots in the car, right? Like when the drivers are driving and stuff like that. I'm just like, how it's quite tough to get like, let alone set up the thing, but trying to, make sure it doesn't fall off, especially when the drivers are like driving at like what 300 kilometers an hour.
This is what I mean by like the Oscars, man. I'm like, what does F1 need to do to get a nomination? They're literally putting small cameras on a car that goes at what 300 kilometers an hour or something like that. I'm like, what do you need to do?
All right, I'm just saying, I'm just like, it blows my mind that it did not even get nominated for that. Okay, I mean, let's actually see the awards that it was nominated for. Let me get my notebook out. Give me a moment, guys. All right.
So I do believe for nominations, it was
okay,
nominated for Best Picture.
Best Picture, Best Visual, Best Film Editing, and also Best Score. So based on what I saw, I guess, and also managed to rack up at least 633 million in box office in USD. And yeah, these are like some of the stats that you guys should know if you have not watched it. Well, I think it's already finished already by the time this episode is out, but nevertheless, you should still watch it by however, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like it's already definitely on Apple TV, so go and check it out there. I also do think that me and Lewis have an interesting opinion on this, where I do believe watching F1 in cinemas, especially if you're able to make the trip to a cinema, is the way to experience a film like this. Or of course, if you have the biggest screen, you have access to a great pair of headphones, you may be able to catch it. But I do believe watching it in cinemas is the best way to watch it, and I'm sure Lewis will agree with that. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, and I do believe, Lewis, you watched F1 during this run where it's now returned to cinemas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you are right.
So
you are right.
he's yeah. So I think the cinematic environment is so important to especially films, and especially as filmmakers ourselves. I'm sure we have the need and also the inspiration to put one of our films in cinemas as well, and that's going to be a dream that we hope to realize. But Lewis, talk about your experience in the cinema watching F1 and how did it really help you, or did it contribute to the experience watching this film?
Okay, so I went to some cinema in Kajang, right? I just kidding. Okay, I'm just kidding. I went to a cinema, right? I went to the cinema and watching it in the cinema, I must say it was fantastic. It was fantastic, the experience. Now, I wish it was IMAX, to be honest with you, but beggars can't be choosers, and I think IMAX was a bit. I did not remember the pricing, and it was a bit too far from my location, or I think it was the timings were a bit off for it. So then I couldn't go. So then I just went to one of the cinemas where it was just like a normal timing. And when I watch it at the cinema, I thoroughly enjoy it. because obviously watching like the cinematography, the visuals on a big screen, it was a pleasure to watch, really, you know. And obviously there's something about going to the cinema which you don't get compared to like watching it at home. Now, I must say, like, yes, it's don't get me wrong, it's nice for you to be able to watch films at home, but something about going to the cinema has a different feeling. Not only the viewing experience, but going to the cinema, hyping up, driving your car to the cinema, or take your donkey to the cinema, or what? Okay, not drive your donkey, but getting to the cinema itself. There's something that you can't take away from going to the cinema, and the moment when you get to the cinema, have a popcorn, and then watch the big film on the big screen. It's certainly experience that no one can ever take away from. And obviously, unfortunately, now the day that we're filming this is 2 days before Hari Raya. No, I'm just kidding.
No, but I actually do think I actually have some do think that the thing that really makes the cinematic experience different from what we have at home, it boils down to a simple thing for me right now, which is there's no pause button in the cinema.
Agreed.
You have to experience the movie the way the director and the filmmakers intended it. Everybody can pause, and then after that they'll say, I'm going to use a Malaysian term here for our audience. It just means being cut off, but a Malaysian term is like potong steam, right? And I'm just like, of course it's potong steam. You went and paused it, right? So of course it makes no sense now. You don't have the same feeling. You're not on that ride. Can you imagine watching Avatar on your phone and then just pausing it? And I just feel like I'm not trying to be that guy harping on about phone versus laptop versus all that. But if you have the opportunity to watch it in a cinema, in whatever experience you choose, I feel like you should take that opportunity, because you watch it in a way that the filmmakers and the people behind the film wish for you to watch it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's one of the most important things about going to cinema. And I've recently, not to be that Malaysian guy hating on Singapore, which I'm not hating on Singapore. I'm just offering some constructive criticism for the Singaporean cinema going audiences.
Better.
Well, that's Lewis's opinion, but my cinematic experience in Singapore, I find that I'm always having to share the cinema with people in Singapore who have access to so many great movies, and they just don't go and watch it. You know what I mean? The cinema going culture in Singapore is just not as frequent as it is here. And I feel here, even though there's a lot of improvements to be had, and I think we can do a lot more to push the cinema going experience, I also believe that we must be able to make cinema affordable, but also able to engage with our audience. And beyond that as well, I do believe we should be able to have different experiences for all kinds of people, and to bring that kind of to bring the experience of watching films culturally to our society a lot more. And I feel like, at least if we can all say going to cinema is something we all like to do once in a while, we like to watch. Obviously, as filmmakers, once in a while doesn't quite apply to us, but as the average guy, I think going to the cinema must feel like a worthy investment, right? So if I'm paying $80, $200, I'm expecting a certain amount of experience, a certain experience, I will say. But I just want to emphasize at the end of this that going to the cinema is a very important thing to experience movies as filmmakers. But let's circle back to F1 for a moment here. What did you feel about the racing sequences, Luis? Was it exciting? Did you like the cinematography from the smaller cameras versus the giant thing? And of course, there's a shit ton of visual effects, and there's a lot of the way they make the visual effects feel so invisible, and they try to keep to the realistic point of view here. But just the racing sequences, what did you think of those racing sequences? Did it feel like really action-packed to you, or did it feel like it was exciting?
Okay, I mean, like, I thoroughly enjoyed like the close-ups of the scenes when they were racing in the car. To be honest with you, more than I enjoyed like the other shots. Why? Because obviously, like, to a normal audience, or to a normal member of the public who has not worked on sets before or whatnot, they don't realize the amount of planning and the amount of logistic that goes behind behind the scenes to make sure that they get the shot that they want in there, right? I'm a lot more impressed about that, because now if you're talking about like something simple as just like putting a camera in a certain spot and just like capturing in a car, okay, obviously it takes some skills and all to do it, but if you're talking about a guy who knows like the cameras, or who has experience behind this, you really know that like it takes a lot of planning for them to be able to put the mini cameras into the seat, into the car itself when driving at 300 kilometers an hour, right? Compared to like you just putting your camera on like a normal location and just seeing the cars go by. I mean, okay, like obviously yes, there's planning. There has to be planning for all the scenes. Don't get me wrong. Don't be like Wong Kar-wai, who just the brother just goes into any scene and just shoot. But but for the car itself, it takes a lot more planning. Not only the logistics, but remember that this film was filmed during the F1 season, right? And they only had a limited amount of time to like make sure they get the shots right. And plus, in a normal F1 racing weekend, you have like the first round. I think is the Friday session where you have like the first rounds of like time trials. I don't know how it works now. The second one will be on Saturday, another time trial session to get warmed up, and the Sunday is the race day. So they did not have enough time to like trial and error. They just literally had no choice but to do it and just hope for the best. But in reality, look how it looks now. It's just a bit of a
I mean, I'm sure there's a yeah, I mean, they've got 3 nominations. I'm sure they're not upset. It's just sort of like, I feel the amount of planning that must have gone into this film must have been insane, because like they had to literally create their own fake Formula One team, complete with the car, the garage, the team, the people to fix the car, and all these the pit crew, sorry, and all these things. It's like, can you imagine the amount of detail? Like, as a filmmaker, I'm freaking blown away, because if you think about how we shoot films and you apply that logic to them, and you think about how long they must have been planning this, I don't even think it was even a few months. I feel like it's years, because it's like you gotta have, if you make one mistake, your whole thing is gone, because now you gotta reconfigure, and you can't ask Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen to like race again. Excuse me, Lewis, just one more time, please. I don't think that's how it works, because they're actually competing while you're just trying to make a shot look good. So to me, that is like, I'm blown away, to be honest. Just from a logistical standpoint, all the producers, PAs, and everyone who works the below the line jobs on set. I mean, to me, I think kudos to those guys. Obviously, the above the line Brad Pitt, Joseph Kosinski, and all these guys, the stars of the show are, of course, they will get their applause, But I feel the people who actually make things happen, they need to be seen a lot more,
Yeah, like the
So. Exactly, the unsung heroes. But now let's get into the characters of this film. So, of course, we've got Sonny, we've got Joshua, but let's talk for a moment about Sonny and his character and how it reflects the way the film is going, and why there might be a possible sequel in the future. Because I think when I watch the film, it's easy to just walk off and say Sonny is an F1 driver. But I don't think that's the case. I think he's more than an F1 driver. I think he's some guy who's chasing that final lap, the lap that you see at the end where he's driving, he feels like flying, the sound disappears and all that good shit. I feel that's what he's chasing in every form, which is why when we watch him, when he starts, he's in a different motorsport, then he goes into F1, and then after he leaves F1, he joins another motorsport. So that feels like a progression of him trying to find the perfect lap every single time. I don't think it's strictly pushed into F1, although I have no idea how they plan to name the sequel, because F2 is just Formula 2, so that means he's going down anyway. That's, I'm sure, a discussion for another day. But Lewis, what do you think about Sonny? Just Sonny's character in this film.
Yeah, I mean, as how I mentioned in intro, if you want to watch Brad Pitt, you just watch Brad Pitt for who he is. But forget about Brad Pitt being Brad Pitt. Sonny as a character himself, you see a guy who was competing, I don't know what the Americans call it, NASCAR. I don't know, the racing.
Yes, yes.
Correct, right? Yeah, NASCAR. He was coming from like from a NASCAR background, and then the term F1 in America seems like quite like not to say alienated, but in a way it's just like not so common as to what it is now. Because like back then, let's say 10 years ago, you you only had one race in America, which I can't remember. I think it was the Texas Grand Prix or whatnot, the Dallas Fort Worth Grand Prix. Then now you have 3 races in there. So him as a character, like from a NASCAR background, going into F1 is literally unheard of. I'm sure in the past it must have been done, yes. And then it's just like this guy who was like a legend, I guess you could say a legend in the NASCAR series, and then he's trying to give it a go in F1. Now, F1 and NASCAR, they're 2 different things. Yes, 2 of them drive a car, but you look at the designs of the car, they look different, of course. So him trying to like challenge himself in another motorsport, especially the age that he was also, I don't think his age was revealed in the film. I could be wrong, right?
Well, he's not. Well, he's not in his 20s, lah. That's the.
We'll put it as like he's not in his 20s. Let's just say 40s or 50s. In like let's just say 40s.
Yeah, I would say like for mid 40s, early 50s.
Let's just say around.
But yeah, you're right. He's not a young man.
He's not a young
that
man.
way.
So it's just like basically like he's not a rookie. All right, he's not a rookie. He's not like an up and coming guy like you know how Max Verstappen. Like I think he's our age right now, of 6 years old. No, I'm just kidding. He was around about. He's born in 99, so around there. So you know when he was up and coming, everyone's talking about him be the next prodigy. Whereas you don't have a lot of spotlight on like an old geezer coming from another sport, or let alone in general in any sports where he or she gets a spotlight, right? So in a way, it's kind of like a redemption story in a way, like how he had an accident in NASCAR once upon a time, and then he didn't win like that certain like trophy that he wanted in NASCAR. So in a way, it's like kind of like a redemption story for him to put what is right in F1, let's just say. But
yeah, I mean, I think it's really good that we love all these redemption stories, but it's so nice, like Lewis said, to see a redemption story where the protagonist is an aging protagonist. You know, he's not a young guy like Joshua trying to break into the top F1 drivers. He's a guy who's going to be labeled a has-been, you know, a guy who never was, because he never won any F1. Yeah, he's a guy who crashed in F1 when he was young and never went back and all these things. So he's got all those regrets, whether he wants to admit it or not. And then Javier Bardem's character comes in and it's like, hey, you want to try again? My team sucks, but we are an F1 team and I'll put you in that seat. And he makes history with that, and you know. And you can see the effect he has across the whole team, how the pit crew starts feeling more confident, how they start looking at themselves, and of course, the effect that it has on that cocky Joshua, who really needed that kick in the butt, you know, to really get himself in order. But Lewis, I want to talk about an important topic that this film has been circled around, is that can someone who doesn't enjoy F1 or doesn't necessarily consider themselves a fan of F1 and they're new to it, do you think people like that can enjoy F1, the film?
Excuse me. Well, let's put it out here. I'm not really a big fan of F1. Do I follow it? Not really, but it sometimes it comes on my news or whatever. I see it and just like, oh, cool, someone won this Grand Prix, whatever, fine. I'm not really a big fan of F1, but I certainly enjoyed it for what it is, all right? So, like, let's say, like, when I watched it, I really felt like the drama behind it, you know, like how certain bits where you had Joshua's character and also Sunny's character having a go at each other, you know, like the internal conflicts that you don't see a lot of in like these sort of like sports films, sorry, not sports films, but in like real life sports, because most of the time you're just only focused on the action, but you don't really see what goes on behind the scene, for example, which is like another story. Not another story. It's just like how when you watch that series, the F1 series, I think it's Ride to Die on Netflix itself. That's like the first time ever you get to see the true behind the scenes of what an F1 team is like, and also what goes on behind the scenes, and you start to see a lot of the internal conflicts in a way. So to people who have not watched it, give it a go. Like don't have expectations for it. It's a complete new film, and I don't think, it's not to say I've never done before concept before, but you had previous films in the previous films like
yeah, I mean it's an extremely familiar concept, and also it has all these like these tropes lah, in order to, it's very like from a screenwriting point of view, a lot is left up to the organization and how they prepare to shoot all these races, and realism is the goal here, it seems, right? But the screenwriting sort of structure of it is a very simple structure where you're looking at sort of a Rocky Balboa kind of structure where, and I'm talking Rocky 1, not Rocky 3, where he's a newbie or a has-been and he's finding redemption, or he's finding the chance to finally get a big break. So, and then, it becomes this heartwarming story at the end. It's the classic everyday sports drama formula. But I think what we need to look at also is how the film has used that, which a lot of people walked away, a decent amount of them walked away, feeling that the film was a bit too cheesy because of how it ends, which is understandable, I guess. Some people don't really like all that happy endings in that same way. And of course, in a more modern filmmaking, it's less and less, it's used less and less. But I think that's a good point to look at. I think, Lewis, do you think realism is the new selling point for blockbusters? Because F1, make no mistake, is a blockbuster film. So do you think the more realistic a film is, the easier it is, the easier time it has of being a blockbuster? Because F1 is going to start something and everyone's going to be like, oh, let's do one about badminton. Let's do one about, like, of course, you can look at Top Gun, Maverick, also directed by Joseph Kosinski, where they showed all the realism of flying a jet and all these kinds of things. Of course, it's Tom Cruise, so you can actually have an actor there. But I think the main question is, do you think realism in filmmaking is going to be a selling point for blockbusters?
Well, first things first, like if you talk about realism, like especially for sports drama, I would say that it's quite good if there's a certain amount of realism in the story itself. Now, just slightly going off topic, I mean, obviously for certain genres, you can't do like a genre such as like sci-fi with realism, because obviously everything is fictional and everything's done through like CGI or like computer or whatnot, right? Not AI. Okay, not AI. I don't like that. But nevertheless, it's just like when you're talking about the sports drama genre itself, I would say I like films to have a bit of realism for it to be like a blockbuster in a way. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about the storyline itself, because most of these like sports dramas, like some of them are like from real life events. Also, if you take films like Invictus, for example, is based on a 1995 South African rugby winning team. Also, then what other films are out there? There are probably a bunch more other films out there that I've watched, but I can't think on the top of my head. But nevertheless, it's not the matter about the story being realistic, but the way you present it matters on how the realism acts. Because at the end of the day, when you do a sports drama, you really want to feel the raw authenticness of the film itself to help make it sell, right? Yes, I agree the ending is a bit cheesy, all right, but there were certain moments when if you felt like the rawness of the film really entices you to like really pay attention on what is going to happen. Let's take for example Damson Idris's character as Joshua, right? Joshua, you see this guy as like an up and coming kid, thinks he knows it all, but in reality, I think he just needs an Asian mom, which Mohnish told me this, to really give him a good lesson on life. Now, that's what you call good realism right there. You want to have all these sort of characters that you be able to relate to, and also like just like a bit of internal conflict here and there, the good times, the bad times, and also maybe as a bonus, if the cinematography feels realistic, also that's another bonus in a way. Over to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with everything he said. I think F1 and blockbusters alike, I think it all depends on the story and the way it's presented. Because in the case of F1 or Invictus or Rocky or Bandit Like Beckham, they're all freaking sports dramas, but not all of them follow realism to the T. But you have many different versions that seem to be working now. F1 is, I promise you, F1 will be one of many after this, especially with the amount of success it's had. It's just incredibly difficult to recapture that. I do think sports dramas have always been a thing in cinema, especially during our time. But I also think that it depends on the story, and I don't necessarily think realism is going to be the only way a blockbuster is successful. Because if that were the case, Avatar would not be successful. Because if you think realism is all there is to blockbusters, Avatar takes that and blows that out of the water. But I think that is our thoughts on F1. And just to close this off, I do believe that checking out F1 in the many experiences available in the cinema or at home if you can, but of course we will always recommend cinemas first, is the way to check it out. It is a very exciting film. You can watch it with your family, you can watch it with your friends, and it's a very great experience to go in and really enjoy yourself. So do check that out. And of course, do check us out on our Letterboxd. Link is all in the description right now. So we'll be more active there. And thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. And we hope to see you guys for our many episodes coming up.